Okay, are we ready?
Oh, I cannot see here. Good morning, everyone. Let me make sure that we have. Okay, perfect. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, based on where you are joining us from. I'd like to thank you all for making time today to join the CCAC National Planning and Implementation Hub meeting. So really quickly, as you all know, at CCAC, we believe that fast action to control SLCP can deliver substantial climate and air quality benefits. And we also believe that achieving the full benefit of SLCP reduction requires action at the national scale, where decision regulating industry, the environment, and the economy are made, right? So that is why CCAC has set an ambitious goal that by 2030, right, all state partners have further integrated air quality and climate planning and have implemented SLCP mitigation actions. So in support of this goal, our hub, the National Planning and Implementation Hub, right, support countries in assessing the SLCP emissions and mitigation options and in a prioritized, targeted, and cost-effective manner. My name is Malik Aidara. I'm a climate and energy advisor for USAID. I'm also one of the co-chairs of the CCAC National Planning and National Policy and Planning Hub. I co-chair this hub along with my friend Ben Brida, who is also on the call from Cote d'Ivoire. I'm delighted to be the moderator of today's session. I would like to again welcome you all today. Pretty much this session is part of our CCAC Inside meeting series, which aim to provide an opportunity and a platform, right, to participant partner countries to learn and learn more about emerging issues and contribute ideas from their respective countries or organizations work on SLCP planning and mitigation. We have a pretty full agenda today. As you can see, we will hear about the experience from the US, particularly as it relates to the Inflation Reduction Act. We'll hear experience from Nigeria, Panama, and Central America. We will also discuss SLCP mitigation and how SLCP mitigation can also help boost the NDC 3.0, right? So today's meeting is particularly very important as it will also provide an incredible opportunities to new members, because as I understand, we do have a few countries that have actually joined CCAC, and we want them to be able to actually learn from countries that have been members for quite some time, so we can actually have a better understanding of how they can actually benefit from being part of the CCAC, and how we can see how CCAC can really help them planning the SLCP mitigation, right? So we are joined today by 6 amazing speakers and strong champions of SLCP/methane mitigation. I have here today Sarah Terry from the US Environment Protection Agency, Jennifer Rojas, the coordinator of strategic communication at La Ruta del Clima in Panama. And we also have Luis Victor Gallardo, senior modeling engineer, climate lead at Climate Lead Group. We have Bala Bapa, the CCAC point of contact in Nigeria. We also have Luis Gonzalez from UNEP. And finally, Carlos Gonzalez, the project manager at CCAC, right? All of these speakers will actually be able to actually share their experience, their perspective on SLCP mitigation. And oh, I forgot, I miss here Chris Malley from SEI as well. We'll be talking about NDC 3.0, right? So we'll go through all of the presentation, and we'll then open up, the floor for questions and answer, because we have some of the speakers today who will actually be able, will not be able to stay with us until the end of the session. So so without further ado, I will pass the floor to Sarah, who will present herself first, introduce herself, right? And walk us through the U.S. Government Inflation Reduction Act. Sarah, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Malik. Hi, I'm Sarah Terry. I'm the group leader for the Climate International Multimedia Group that's housed in the EPA Air Quality Office, the Office of Air Quality Planning and Standards. And I'm joined this morning by Hannah Bowens, who is our summer intern. So she's listening in on her first day this morning of her internship. So I'm going to be looking over here because my slides are over here. So I'll be going back and forth a little bit, but I'm just giving a brief overview this morning of the Inflation Reduction Act. So specifically a subset of that, which is managed out of my office, the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program. And it's one of the ways that I think about national planning in the US context. This is part of a broader suite of investments that's been made in the last couple of years between the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act that was passed in November of 21 and the Inflation Reduction Act that was passed in 22. The U.S. has made billions of dollars of investments in clean energy, infrastructure, energy efficiency, and other climate and environmental investments, among other things. So what I'm going to talk about today is just one small piece. It's a $5 billion program, but compared to some of the numbers you see on the charts, you'll see that it's a fairly small piece of the puzzle, but it's an important one, and it represents, I think, the national planning sort of component of this overall effort. So specifically, the Inflation Reduction Act, really the largest investment in climate funding in American history. You can see, I don't know about how your environmental agencies, but we don't usually use the B word, right? The billions. But that's what the kind of investments that have been made here between. The biggest chunk of that is actually through tax credits. And those are not capped, which is an interesting feature. And so actually the total spending is likely to be much more than the 392 that's identified in this slide, because the folks can continue to receive the tax credits. But again, I'm going to be focusing on a very small portion of this here, this climate pollution reduction grant program here. But EPA is investing quite a bit in this Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund and some of these other programs that, if people have an interest, we can come back and talk about on another day. The Inflation Reduction Act, as I said, EPA has a number of different programs, a lot of investments in things like clean ports, clean diesel, a variety of competitive grant programs that are focused on different sectors. And again, I'm happy to share these slides when we're done, so you don't have to write everything down. There's a Solar for All program that's investing $7 billion in solar. And the other interesting feature about some of these programs is the focus on environmental justice and investing in communities. So later, I'm going to be talking about the community or the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program, whose recipients have been states, local agencies, and tribal governments. But there's been quite a bit of funding that has been directed towards communities as well. So community organization, nonprofit organizations, and environmental justice organizations, which is a nice complement to that sort of governmental planning piece. So in particular, the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program is broken out into two components. There's a planning grant portion, that's a small portion, 250 million. And then the biggest chunk is devoted to implementation grants, so 4.6 billion to actually implement specific measures that are identified in the planning phase. So basically, we took that 250 million. We have a standard allocation formula that we use for federal grants to states, locals, and tribes and territories. And we basically took that formula and applied it to the 250 million. And that enabled us to get that money out the door very, very quickly, as opposed to going through some sort of a competition. So that money is already out the door. It went out the door, I think, in the March, if not earlier, timeframe. So we were able to, from when the bill was passed, actually it was issued in 2023. So I think by the summer, the bill passed in August of 22. By the summer of 23, this planning money was out the door. And you can see this is sort of the distribution. Basically, if you wanted a grant as a state government or a local government, you got one. And so the only ones who declined to participate as a state were South Dakota, Iowa, Kentucky, and Florida. However, you'll see by the dots that municipalities within those states could still opt in. So we have coverage in, I think, every state except Alaska. Oh no, Alaska did get a state grant, but not a municipal grant. So it's a pretty wide distribution that covers all of the US. The requirements for that, focusing here on national action planning, they had to submit by March, again, this past March, they submitted a priority action plan. This was sort of a quick run at a plan to identify the measures that they have prioritized as a government. And that was going to set the stage for the implementation grant application. So the priority, the PCAPs came in, and then they submitted their implementation grant applications that were to implement measures that were identified in the PCAP. Next year, they'll have to do a comprehensive action plan that includes all the sectors that they want to address from a climate perspective, and they have to identify their GHG reduction goals. And we've asked them also to identify the potential co-benefit, the other pollutant co-benefits that will come from that. And then there's some ongoing reporting requirements. So as I said, in that PCAP, they need to provide us their GHG inventory. They need to identify the measures that they're going to implement. And they have to do an analysis of the benefits for low income and disadvantaged communities. This is a key feature of the CPRG program, is that they have to focus investments on low income and disadvantaged communities. And so for those unfamiliar, we have another piece of legislation called Justice 40 that basically mandates that 40% of the benefits of federal investments accrue to low income and disadvantaged communities. So we've asked grant recipients to identify the benefits that are going to those communities so we can determine that whether or not we've met this 40%. And then a year later, the comprehensive action plan layers on more, which is what are your projected GHG emissions? What are the benefits for the workforce? So we're not just looking for GHG benefits, we're looking for a range, low income and disadvantaged benefits, workforce, jobs, what are those benefits? What are their federal funds? What are their programs out of all those other investments that have made under IRA and the Infrastructure Investment Act? Where are you leveraging other resources to build out your program? And then after you've done your planning, you submit an application to fund specific implementation measures. And so this is that second phase of the program, the implementation phase. And the goal there is to actually pay for the measures. So we're actually focused on getting emission reductions. And again, focusing on community benefits. Can we focus in on historically disadvantaged communities? One of the other goals of the program, as I said, is like, this is a small piece of that big pile of money that's been invested, but how can you take those other pieces and bring them in together and really optimize across all the programs? And sort of demonstrate programs that can be scaled up to other communities. The applications, which were actually due in April, we're in the process of reviewing them right now, but they were across all of these different sectors, were sectors that were able to be have measures applied for. And this is just my last slide, again, running through this pretty quickly, but as I said, the priority climate action plans are in the implementation. So for that 4.6 billion, those applications are in, and we're in the process of reviewing. We received 300 and some applications from all over the country. Again, if you applied, you had to have a plan in place. And so these implementation and planning phases are connected. We're hoping to award the money, notify the awardees this summer, and then award the funds in October of this year. So there's a slightly different timeline for tribes and territories, but it's not too far behind the others. So that's a quick overview of the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program, and I'm happy to take any questions now or later. So thank you, Malik. I hope that met your time frame.
Yes, you did. Thanks so much, Sarah, for this wonderful overview of the pollution section of the IRA. I think it was actually very insightful for the audience that we have here. And I think the key element here, particularly as it relates to the type of group we are in here, is that action planning is really critical. It's really critical to not only secure funding, and then also it's really critical to actually set very important targets, as part of our country's efforts to reduce SLCP emission, right? So the IRA has actually followed pretty much the same sort of process that even the CCAC has been actually following. CCAC, we started with a lot of supports for planning, provided financing, funding to countries, and then technical assistance for countries to develop their SLCP mitigation plan. And then we followed up with some transformation funding as well to actually implement activity. But before I give the floor to Chris here, but very quickly, given the type of audience that we have, which is pretty much international, we have many folks from countries all over the world. Can you in very briefly tell us whether the funding that you actually mentioned, is it domestically focused to the United States, or it is also open to interests or municipalities abroad?
Yeah, it's definitely focused on domestic. In order to qualify, you have to be a state, local, or tribal or territory government of the U.S. There was also a question in the chat about evaluating success, and that's a great question. As you saw in some of the requirements, so the CCAP, the full comprehensive climate action plan needs to include your planned emission reductions that are associated with the measures. But we're going to be we're in the process of developing a full analytical plan that goes measure by measure and evaluates not only the greenhouse gas emission reductions, but the co-pollution benefits that will accompany that for air toxics, for criteria air pollution, and then the associated health benefits. And as I said, there's also requirements about, analytics around jobs, workforce development, and the like. So there will be sort of a comprehensive evaluation and ongoing reporting required on the part of the grant recipients.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Sarah. I'm pretty sure we will have follow-up questions toward the end of today's session. Without further ado, I will actually give the floor to Chris to walk us a little bit through the NDC 3.0 and the SLCP contribution to strengthen it. Over to you, Chris.
Thanks
if you'd
very
like
much,
to also
Matt.
briefly introduce yourself as well before start, that would be helpful. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Malik. Yes, my name is Chris Malley. I'm a researcher at the Stockholm Environment Institute, and I work to try and identify strategies that can simultaneously reduce climate change while at the same time protecting health. And in my presentation today, I want to talk about how the next round of NDC revisions can help us with that mission. To remind everybody what we're trying to do, this graph here shows that when the Paris Agreement was signed, countries submitted NDCs that could collectively reduce air pollution to such an extent that 400,000 premature deaths per year could be avoided by 2050. If we increase ambition of those NDCs to be consistent with the targets in the Paris Agreement, we can more than double that health benefit. We can avoid 1 million premature deaths every year by 2050 if we limit temperature increases to 2 degrees, never mind 1.5 degrees. And so when we think about short-lived climate pollutants in the context of NDCs, our mission is to try and get as close to or exceed that blue line. We need to get higher up this graph to maximize the number of premature deaths that we can avoid from exposure to air pollution at the same time as achieving the Paris Agreement. As Malik, you mentioned in your opening, the CCAC has the ambition that every country in the world includes action on SLCPs in their NDCs. In the last round of NDC revisions in 2021, we made a huge amount of progress on that. SEI and the CCAC Secretariat did an analysis of NDCs, identifying that the inclusion of SLCPs and air pollutants more than doubled between those that were submitted in the Paris Agreement and those that were updated in 2021. And we have big increases in those measures that can achieve climate and clean air benefits. The number of countries including action on electric vehicles or on recycling and composting increased substantially. So even if countries aren't explicitly including action on NDCs, the actions that they identify to achieve their climate change targets are going to reduce SLCPs whether they like it or not. Before the last round of NDC revisions, the CCAC developed guidance to countries on how they can include SLCPs and air pollutants that was framed around 4 opportunities. That guidance is currently being updated to reflect the updated context of developing NDCs 3.0 and the opportunities that we have now since the last round of improvements, and to reflect some of the amazing work, the world-leading work that has been done by CCAC member states in their NDC revisions in 2021 to act as examples to other countries thinking about enhancing their NDCs. These are examples like specifying specific black carbon targets, like in Colombia, like in Chile, in Mexico, where there are explicit targets to reduce black carbon in addition to greenhouse gas reduction targets. Colombia committed to reduce black carbon by 40% by 2030. Black carbon as a component of particulate matter, as everybody knows, has a toxic effect on our health. And by including this target, Colombia identified additional actions over and above those to reduce greenhouse gases that they can take to reduce black carbon in addition to reducing carbon dioxide. For example, Euro 6 vehicle emission standards, off-road machinery emission standards, focusing on clean cooking, All of those were measures that were included in the NDC explicitly because of their black carbon emission reduction potential. We have a group of countries from the last round of NDC revisions that identified for the first time quantitatively the health benefits that could be achieved from implementing their NDC. I think this does a couple of things. It broadens the coalition of support for the NDC within the country and internationally, because now this becomes the responsibility of the Ministry of Health, of other ministries responsible for air pollution and health alongside climate change. But I think it also ramps up the urgency with which it is necessary to implement nationally determined contributions. In Nigeria, it's much more powerful to say that the plan that has been submitted on climate change could stop 30,000 Nigerians dying every year due to the effects of air pollution than it is to say that the aim of the plan is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 47% by 2030. One is far off and is talking about a metric that most people aren't familiar with. The other is talking about people's lives in Nigeria that could be saved from implementing the same plan. We get both of those benefits, the climate change benefit and the health one. To me, the health one increases the urgency of communicating this. So we have 30,000 Nigerians whose deaths could be avoided by implementing the NDC, 7,000 Ivorians, 2,900 Ghanaians, tens of thousands of Americans stated in the NDC as being the health benefits from implementing the nationally determined contribution. So those are the real high points, I think, from the last round of NDCs that we need to expand and emulate in NDC 3.0. There are also challenges. My observation is that as we go from the 2015 NDCs to the first update, in many countries there was a lack of synergy and consistency. In this unnamed country, you can see the graph summarizing their climate change mitigation ambition in 2015 and 2021. In the 2015 NDC, the emissions increased to almost 1 billion tons of carbon dioxide and could be reduced to just under 500 million tons. In the 2021 NDC, the baseline scenario is less than the mitigation scenario in the 2015 NDC. This isn't a result of action that has been taken, but is about the accounting and the development of the scenarios. I don't think that we can afford to go from the 2021 NDC updates to NDCs 3.0 without having a robust description of how we've got from one place to the other, for the transparency of the accounting, but also to reflect on what progress has been made in reality on the ground in implementing the NDCs. So we need to have a much greater reflection of what was committed to in the 2021 NDC, where emissions were said to be going, and how that is then reflected in the next set of NDCs. The second challenge, which I think Sarah did a fantastic job of outlining a practical step forward with, at least for some countries, is on moving from planning and setting targets to implementation. I think developing an NDC is such a huge political lift. It requires so much stakeholder engagement that having developed the document, it's then really easy to lose the momentum as you go from having that document developed to the implementation. And it's easy to lose momentum when the amount of money needed to implement NDCs in developing countries is about $4.3 trillion, and we have a fraction of that actually available to move forward with projects. So we need to be much clearer in NDC 3.0 of what is an aspirational emission reduction target and what are aspirational measures compared to what is concretely able to be implemented and how much that could reduce emissions. We have new context for NDC 3.0 that we didn't have in 2021. First is the continued gap in greenhouse gas emissions required to limit our temperature increase to 1.5 degrees. If we have not already, we're rapidly running out of time to limit our emission reductions to limit global temperature increases to 1.5 degrees. So it is absolutely essential the next round of NDC updates include substantially more commitments on greenhouse gas reductions in order to be consistent with 1.5 degrees. At the same time, air pollution continues to be far too high up the global rankings of risk factors for premature death. Air pollution has now overtaken smoking to be the second largest risk factor for premature deaths globally. Over 8 million premature deaths per year due to air pollution. We're not seeing that coming down. So we have this opportunity to improve health through the implementation of NDCs. We're not seeing it come through in the numbers yet. And we have now an international agreement on where we need to be headed on short-lived climate pollutants like methane. We did not have that in the last round of NDCs. So the Global Methane Pledge aims to reduce emissions by 30% compared to 2020 levels. Unfortunately, when we look at the latest emission results, the latest estimate of emissions from international data sets, we are right in the middle of where the CCAC in their baseline methane assessment report said we would be if we took no action. We're not currently seeing anything like the progress we need on methane emissions to be consistent with meeting the Global Methane Pledge. And that suggests for NDCs 3.0 that we need to have substantially more ambition on reducing methane emissions than we are currently. What we found from the last round of NDCs is when we look at the actions included within them to reduce methane, there are 476. If those measures are implemented to their full technical potential, they could reduce methane emissions by 31% compared to 2020 levels, and therefore achieve the Global Methane Pledge. The problem is that no country is committing to implement the actions needed to their full technical potential. And so we're still falling short of where we need to be on methane, but the actions are there to do it if we had a concerted push. And so to finish, I want to provide 3 recommendations for how countries can think about their next NDC revision and short-lived climate pollutants. Number 1, build on best practice. We have far more examples of how countries should integrate short-lived climate pollutants into their NDCs than we did previously. And hopefully we're going to hear from some later. Whether it's Nigeria, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire in West Africa, whether it's Chile, Mexico, Colombia, Costa Rica, Dominican Republic in Latin America, or Pakistan in Asia, there are a huge number of countries that have included targets on short-lived climate pollutants, stated the health benefits that they can get from implementing their NDCs, identify actions that implicitly or explicitly will reduce short-lived climate pollutants. We need to build on this and ensure that as we go to the next review of NDCs in 2025, that we can report that the number of countries explicitly including actions on air pollution and SLCPs again doubles. I think that is what we should be looking for. The majority of countries even still do not include action on air pollution and SLCPs, even though it doubled between 2015 and 2021. So there's this huge opportunity to build on best practices. Number 2 is that we now have the Global Methane Pledge. And so we now, the good thing about that pledge is it sets the global goal, but it does not say what contribution countries will make or what contribution sectors will make to its achievement. Very few countries state how much they're going to reduce methane in their NDCs, and that needs to change if we're going to have any chance of understanding the extent to which we can achieve the Global Methane Pledge through NDC actions. We need to adopt and expand the approach taken by Japan, where they state explicitly the methane emissions in 2030 after mitigation. This is completely aligned with the Global Methane Pledge in terms of how the target is stated, not particularly with the level of ambition of the target, but allows us to see if every country reported like this, how far we are towards achieving the Global Methane Pledge within NDC. And the final recommendation for me is to focus on measures and measures that can be implemented. We need to identify measures more explicitly in NDCs and think before we include them, what is the mechanism to implementation? How are we going to finance it? I would encourage everybody to read Colombia's annex to their NDCs, where they include over 150 pages all of the measures that will implement their NDC, how they'll be funded, how they'll be monitored, how they'll be taken forward. Excuse me. This example here is a action on livestock that's funded through the NAMA facility and Green Climate Fund. So I will stop there. Thank you very much for your attention.
As usual, thanks so much, Chris, for this comprehensive analysis of the status of NDCs. To everyone who who do not know Chris, I mean, he's actually the brain, right, behind NDC, status around the world, because I think he has a really good knowledge of where countries are and what they are targeting and all of that. And I mean, I think from your brief presentation here, we are noting that even though NDC 2.0 actually is doing a pretty good job in addressing the health impact of SLCP emissions, and is also doing a fairly good job in including more quantitative black carbon targets, as well as including SLCP and air pollution. The inclusion of SLCP and air pollution have really doubled in the NDC, but I think there is a lot of challenges that still remain, which countries should actually take into account as they actually developing the new revision of NDC. And you made some really good recommendation that I invite participants to take notes of, building on best practices and aligning targets to with a GMP targets, as well as focusing on measuring. Those are really good recommendations from Chris here that I urge participants to actually take note of as they are engaging into the revision of their respective NDC. So the next element here on the agenda, we're going to be now talking about national and regional planning project and results. So we are joined for this section by a number of speakers that are representative of key countries who will actually be sharing their perspective. The first to come here to the floor will be Jennifer Rojas, who will be talking a little bit about the National Methane Roadmap and SLCP Roadmap focused on black carbon in Panama. Jennifer, the floor is yours.
Hi, good morning. And Luis, Victor Gallardo?
Yes, thank you, Jennifer.
Yes.
Yeah, this is a joint presentation. Very good afternoon to everyone, and good morning to those who are on this side of the Atlantic. We are in Central America. We're going to be sharing some of our insights and experiences of developing this project in Panama. That's just wrapped up. So let me just count my time. So we're going to show some insights and experiences in our creation of this participative roadmap for Panama's LCCP mitigation. We're a Climate Lead Group, one of the implementer agencies for this project, in collaboration with La Ruta del Clima, SDI, and surely Climate Clean Air Coalition and the government of Panama, who is the main stakeholder for this project. So we're going to look at five points for this presentation. The project timeline, how we engage with the stakeholders, just to exemplify the process. Then local understanding. Panama and many similar economies to Panama have different characteristics than other major developed countries or resource-intensive countries that have all the kind of LCCP sources. So it's important to understand the context. Then we're going to discuss briefly a participatory process where the local stakeholders prioritize measures that they thought, besides mitigating and reducing SLCPs, including methane and black carbon and HFCs, they selected those that could also drive development according to their local context. Then finally, we're going to show some of the scenarios that we developed to inform something that Chris mentioned was very important. That's the implementation of the measures. So you want to reduce emissions. Ideally, besides that, you want to drive development in our developing nations. Then how you do that? So, there are governance things and finance things that need to be addressed. So it's a very crucial part of this plan, this roadmap that we implemented. Um, so the project started in August of 2023, or actually a little bit late July, and it ended in May. We had 3 workshops, or actually 4: a launch workshop, a workshop to prioritize measures and gather the initial feedback from the emissions trajectories and costs as we calculated kind of in the month of September. So this workshop was in November of last year. After the workshop, we did some updates. Then we had a virtual workshop for capacity building. So basically all the tools that we built for the analysis were transferred to different stakeholders in the government. And then we had to develop the implementation pathways to finally have a validation workshop with some hands-on training. So just to show that implementing these projects requires a lot of engagement with the local experts and agencies that know the sectors. So in Panama, it's important to understand that transport is the main source of black carbon, followed by industry, then a little bit of electricity generation, some crop residue, and other vegetation burning, and then other sectors that have fewer weight, a smaller weight on black carbon emissions. Then we have the methane. So livestock is the main source, followed by solid waste and wastewater. And we're going to see some interesting characteristics of these setup in methane. Like, unlike countries that produce fossil fuels that can have some very concrete measures to reduce your methane emissions, livestock emissions are quite hard to deal with, although there are some options. And we're going to see how far they reach in this case. And then hydrofluorocarbons, they're good options. They're more expensive than HFCs, the alternative refrigerants, but we found that it's feasible to actually phase them out according to the established policies. So this is just a brief. So as Chris mentioned, there are like so many measures, hundreds of measures, but not all the measures apply equally to every country. So when you deep dive into a single country and you engage with the local experts, they're gonna understand the barriers to implementation and the suitability of the measures in the local context. So this is just a brief example. I'm not gonna go over all of the details, but we selected and prioritized measures that then we modeled. So we developed basically, we have to bear in mind that Panama, and similarly to other developing countries, they're very high growth countries. So they have either high populations or have rapidly growing populations, or a lot of investment that is driving growth. So income rises, people start spending their money and consuming and eating beef, which of course creates demand for livestock. So it's a challenge. So it's a challenge for emissions reduction. So that's why we develop scenarios to understand, okay, what can happen with a business as usual scenario, considering that Panama has a high growth rate. For instance, in the past 20 years, it grew at 6% of GDP. That's pretty high. And so then what we did was to develop a couple of more scenarios: the current ambition scenario and the scenario that has more ambition. So basically, as some of our colleagues have mentioned before in the call, there are a lot of plans and efforts that are currently already indirectly addressing SLCP mitigation through GHG reductions, with GHG mitigation. What we try to do with the current ambition scenario was just trying to capture all those measures that are currently stated in stated policies and estimated trajectory for SLCPs and compare it to the business as usual. Then we recommended other actions that can further either reduce or avoid emissions. In some cases, as in livestock, these countries are probably going to see a hard time reducing those emissions unless they had a very drastic dietary change, which we did not consider for this study. So it's kind of a big, important thing. So the mitigation, importantly, is going to avoid emissions relative to not doing anything. But then how ambitious we get, that's really a matter of understanding the implementation. And we're going to see some examples, hopefully running you through. So we see the business as usual for methane emissions, and we see the red bar, that's the livestock. And that's the largest bar and the one that grows the most. And it's the hardest to reduce. The good news is that in waste and wastewater, both solid waste and wastewater, it's possible to reduce emissions a lot more quickly. So this other graph helps us visualize the change per sector. So one thing is to look at the emissions globally for the country and then disaggregate per sector, just try to understand the viability of reductions in every sector. And in the case of Panama, we found that in the case of waste, solid waste and wastewater, and also energy, it was with the more ambitious scenario, it was possible to see important reductions. But in the case of livestock and rice cultivation, we estimated that what was possible was to avoid emissions, not so much reduce them. So for black carbon, we have reductions. Actually, I'm just, for a matter of time, I'm just going to skip here to see the disaggregation per sector. We see that in the more ambitious scenario, we have a reduction of electricity generation, also transport, that was the highest source of emission, and the residential sector. So things like click cooking help in reducing black carbon. One of the measures that were not prioritized in our workshops were measures for the industrial sector. So all the fuel that's consumed in industry, there's some heavy fuels there, diesels that are used for heat generation. Those have a different connotation. You can think of electrification measures for those, but in this case, it was not prioritized. That's why we see the growth for industry. And then finally, HFCs. So they can represent between 8 and 9.3% of the energy sector emissions in Panama. So all in terms of CO2 equivalent. So there's an important potential of avoiding these emissions down the road, especially in countries where air conditioning is so necessary for cooling spaces, and it's part of people's daily lives to use cooling. So all in all, we also looked at the cost, and that's where it gets interesting. So if you disaggregate the cost per sector, we for both scenarios, the good news is that in the current division scenario, almost every sector is producing some sort of savings relative to the business as usual scenario, which is very good because that means that these technologies are increasing the country's productivity, and that's linked to prioritizing the measures that produce development or help the country develop. If we increase ambition, of course, we implement or we model an implementation that's more aggressive. It requires more technological change, and then the savings are still positive. It should be positive here. So it's $4.9 billion in savings accumulated between 2023 and 2050. And that is important. But then there's like a trade-off. The more ambition you have, the more you're going to have to invest, and then your savings that are positive, that's why they're in blue here, or the relative cost relative to value, is actually a good thing for data to be blue in this graph. So with that information, then we were able to build a more detailed implementation breakdown of the measures when we define a strategy for every sector. So in this case, we have the waste sector. There are some quantitative objectives to reduce the emissions in that sector, and then some specific actions to drive the change both in the short term and in the mid to long terms. And then every action has its indicators to track. So this is an example of how quantitative methods and the consultation with the stakeholders allowed us to build this tool for the government. And key takeaways from this work. It's important to understand that every sector is different. Some have additional costs, others have savings. In the case of Panama, savings are positive overall. Then both scenarios have considerable avoided emissions, and reductions are possible in some sectors. Then livestock growth is something that can limit the methane emission. So implementing dietary change, or at least that's an uncertainty, right? Because it depends on what people demand. That's going to determine a lot of the success of methane mitigation in these countries. And then finally, there can be more avoided emissions with less savings, and the actors really emphasize the importance of finding or understanding where the funds for the investments would come from, especially for developing countries. That is really important for the stakeholders. So yeah, thank you so much for your attention, and that's it for us.
Thank you so much for. Oops, do you hear me? Yes, thank you so much for this presentation. This is quite an interesting story here. Some of the key, I mean, you mentioned a lot of things, but some of the key takeaway from what you presented here is that failure to take action on mitigation can be more expensive for Panama. And clearly, you have done a lot of analysis to really help you determine which sector you should be focused. Panama should be focusing is SLCP reduction action, and where would be the best, the more benefit for the country. And that is actually a really good example that other folks can actually look into, and perhaps even reach out more after this call to learn more from your experience. Right. Thanks, Luis, for this presentation.
Thank you.
So next here on this call, we're gonna have we're gonna talk a little bit about the example of Nigeria with Balabapa, who will be talking about his experience in integrating SLCP planning and implementation. Balabapa, please introduce yourself and take us through your presentation.
Thank you, Malik. Hello, everyone. I'm Balabapa. I coordinate CCAC activities.
We do hear you, but
yeah, okay, I'm back. I have okay. Okay, I coordinate CCAC activities here in Nigeria, and in this CCAC Planning Hub experience sharing, I will take us through activities leading to the development, mainstreaming, and implementation and sustainability of the Nigerian National SLCP Plan. I understand I have limited time, about less than 10 minutes for my presentation. So I will try as much as possible to respect the time allocated, but permit me if I don't emphasize certain areas, I will concentrate on those areas that maybe we need to discuss further. The highlights of my presentation include the overview of the national planning process, the approved SLCP mitigation measures, the strategy of implementation, and the funding sources for the implementation of the National Action Plan, and then the NDC revision exercise, how we succeeded in including SLCPs in the revised NDC, and then the implementation of the NDC itself with the help and coordination of the NDC partnership, and then the MRV, the monitoring, reporting, and verification process currently going on generally, but most importantly to include MRV of SLCPs, and then the implementation challenges that we encountered. So the CCAC, upon approval for Nigeria to develop a national action plan, we signed the PCA and proceeded to establish a national SSCP coordination office, and then appoint all the necessary staff from the ministry to coordinate the activities. And then we in Nigeria implemented both the institutional strengthening component as well as the SLCP national plan development. And we used the institutional strengthening process to create awareness and mobilize all the necessary stakeholders after carrying out a comprehensive stakeholder mapping. And from these stakeholders that were identified, we established the advisory group, which consists of some directors in the strategic ministries, and also the task force, which is comprised of desk officers or technical officers in those ministries, who will be directly responsible, for making contributions in the development of the National Action Plan. So after doing that, we made sure that we established some SLCP desk officers in those ministries for coordination and also, sustainability. So we carried out regular consultative meetings towards the developing of the National SSCP Plan. And we successfully developed the National SSCP Plan and recommended 22 mitigation measures, which were presented to our Federal Executive Council, which approved them for implementation. And they are now currently under implementation. But most importantly, they have been included in our revised NDC. So the implementation process is together with the implementation of the revised NDC. It's good to mention that the plan was guided and coordinated by lead partners appointed by the CCAC Planning Hub, to include Stockholm Environment Institute. We have Chris here and Johan from the Stockholm. They really played a very, very important role in coordinating the process. We also have Ayupa from UK, and also the UN Environment Regional Office, and of course the participation and active participation of the CCAC National Hub. The approved 22 mitigation measures cut across several sectors, to include transport, residential, oil and gas, industry, waste, agriculture, power, and HFCs. So all the measures are there, which have serious implication in addressing both the climate component and also the air quality component. So these are the measures that have been included in our revised NDC and are currently being implemented by all stakeholders. So upon approval of the 22 mitigation measures, the same stakeholders that were involved in the development of the National Action Plan came together to develop an implementation strategy. And this implementation strategy was guided by the approval of the Federal Executive Council, which says that the Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Budget and National Planning, and Office of the Secretary to the Government should coordinate the overall implementation of the plan. But the Department of Climate Change and the National Council on Climate Change now, who are now the UNFCCC focal point, and the SLCP coordination team, in liaison with all other stakeholders, we are responsible for the implementation of the plan, and we have been working together in the implementation process currently going on. So the Ministry of Budget and national planning was responsible for mainstreaming the action plan into the national development process and also ensure budgetary provision from the MDS budgetary request for SLCP projects to be included in our national appropriation for implementation. So the Ministry of Environment will now, and now the National Council on Climate Change, are very well coordinating the implementation and for sustainability as well. So this is as regards to the implementation, which is currently going on and is coordinated by the National Council on Climate Change, the Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Budget and National Planning, and the Office of the Secretary to the Government. So during the
Looks like we're losing Balabapa. Let's give it a few seconds here.
Funding that will assist but I can hear you hearing me now?
Yeah, we can you rewind like 10 seconds? So we missed you for a bit. We could not hear you for about 10 seconds. So you can rewind. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so sorry for the services which are posing some challenges here. So I was saying that after the approval of the National Action Plan by the Federal Executive Council, we carried out an implementation strategy meeting where we hinged on the approval by the Federal Executive Council that the Ministries of Environment, Budget and National Planning and Office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation should coordinate the overall implementation. And then the Ministry of Environment and National Council on Climate Change and the National SLCP team are coordinating activities to implement the approved National Action Plan together with the ministries, departments, and agencies and all other stakeholders. And this is what is currently going on. So the Ministry of Budget and National Planning are also responsible for mainstreaming the process into the National Development Plan and also making budgetary provision to MDS to implement SLCP projects. So overall, this is the implementation strategy that was adopted, and this is what is being implemented to achieve the objectives of the national SLCP plan. So during the meeting, we also identified funding sources for the implementation of the plan. So the funding sources include MDA national budgets, which I talked about, which will be the ministry, department, and agencies will identify the projects working together with the Ministry of National Budget and National Planning, and they will get them, incorporated and approved in the national appropriation for implementation. Then we also have identified funding from donor support. Like it includes those from the CCAC expression of interest cycle, where we worked with the Ministry, Department of Agency to identify projects and then develop concept notes which are developed and then we source for funding. We also have direct collaboration with international donors. Then we also have another funding sources from the NDC partnership, which is supporting the implementation of the Paris Agreement. So some of the areas that the NDC implementation forwarded to the NDC partnership include those projects that will support the implementation of SLCP projects. So we are working together with the NDC partnership and also the private sector, which is also contributing to the funding of SLCP projects. So all these are areas that we think, or rather we are exploiting to implement the National Action Plan. So we also have contributions from, we work closely with the CCAC and Stockholm Environment Institute to source for other funding sources from climate finance sources like the development partners, Global Methane Hub, NDC Partnership, GCF, GEF, World Bank, FAO, and others. And we're also recently working closely with the USAID, who are supporting Nigeria to implement SLCP projects, especially the methane reduction projects in the oil and gas sector, waste, and also agriculture. And also we are working with the RMI and C40, especially in addressing municipal waste management, especially in Lagos. So these are some of the strategies we are adopting to implement the SLCP plan. Then just to mention about the Nigeria's NDC revision exercise. During the exercise, UNDP, through the Climate Promise funding, support Nigeria specifically to SLCP and to ensure that SLCP were included in the revised NDC, and this is have been done, and other areas that were focused include the waste and water sector, forestry and nature-based solutions, gender integration, ILO employment, and decent work program. All these were included in the revised NDC. So these were the efforts we made in including the SLCPs into the revised NDC, and it's currently being implemented. Then we also, as I said earlier, we mainstreamed the SLCPs into the national development process and included the measures in the revised NDC in the areas of energy, oil and gas, AFOLU, industry, transport, and waste. So the NDC implementation team work together with the National SLCP coordination team to make sure that the SLCP measures are implemented to achieve those targets. And in this regard, CCAC is also supporting Nigeria to increase action to reduce SLCPs in the during the implementation of the NDC, and it's also currently supporting Nigeria to ensure that SLCPs are well reflected in the NDC preparation coming up. So so the next item will be the measurement reporting and verification, MRV. MRV is being supported, Nigerian MRV is being supported by so many international organizations, to include ICAT, CCAC, European Union, UNDP, and Stockholm Environment Institute. All these organizations are playing their various roles in the various aspects of the implementation of the MRV in Nigeria. The ICAT supported Nigeria to develop an overarching institutional arrangement in 3 sectors: the oil and gas, FOLU, and then transport. The EU is supporting Nigeria MRV in waste and electricity, while the CCAC has just recently approved a project for the implementation of MRV in specific sectors, and the project will soon take off. It will be implemented by SDN. So we had some challenges. There is no project that goes without challenges, but most of the challenges we try to overcome. The challenges include, as we said earlier, the identification, prioritization, and approval of SLCP projects in the ministries, departments, and agencies. And then when it comes to Ministry of Budget and National Planning, they participated in, guiding the ministry, department, and agency to identify these projects, and they are very supportive in making sure that these projects were included in the national appropriation. Then another challenge is the weak link between the national, which is the federal government, and the subnationals, which are states and local governments. Well, the national is responsible for policy, coordination, and monitoring, and to some extent, guiding the implementation. But most of the activities are carried out at the subnational level. So, but that linkage is a bit weak, but there are efforts to strengthen the linkage, because most of the activities are carried out at the subnational levels. And to that extent, the Federal Ministry of Environment has established climate change desk offices in each of the states of the Federation as contact and liaison, which will ease, implementation at the subnational levels. Then we also have another challenge of lack of capacity across most of the MDAs and the subnationals, as I mentioned earlier, in the identification, preparation, and SSCP projects. And, to get a bankable project, you have to identify, the right type of project and develop the concept note and go ahead to develop the plan. These are some of the, capacity, the challenges of lack of capacity in that area. And we are contacting so many organizations, especially international donor funding agencies, to help build capacity in that area. Then generally, lack of adequate funding for SSCP projects, and we are always, looking for funds to implement projects that will reduce SLCPs in Nigeria. Thank you. Over to you, Malik.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Balabapa, for this comprehensive presentation of the situation in Nigeria. As you mentioned, Nigeria is one of the pioneers in Africa in terms of developing policies and regulation aiming to reduce greenhouse gases, including SLCP. And Nigeria has gone through developing strategies, national action plan, and you have also work with a number of partners to identify funding to finance actions that have been identified in this very many action plan. And clearly, there's a lot of challenges that are actually remaining, but we hope that that will actually be overcome over the years, so Nigeria will be able to make progress to what is the targets that it has identified in this program. So, as you indicated, USAID, we remain a strong partner for Nigeria in making progress towards those targets. Thanks so much for this presentation. So, we don't have a lot of time left actually here. I will now leave the floor to Luisa Gonzalez and Carlos Gonzalez, who will be actually presenting the Central America case for achieving air quality, climate, and health goal. If you can be very brief in your presentation, that would be helpful, so we can have at least 10 minutes of Q&As before we end. Please introduce yourself and go over your presentation. Thanks.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon. Just please let me know if you can see my presentation now.
Yes, we can see it. If you can put it in okay, perfect.
Okay, excellent. So thank you for the invitation. I'm Luisa Gonzalez. I'm supporting the CCAC Secretariat, managing this project that I'm going to present right now with my colleague Carlos Gonzalez from the Central American Commission of Environment and Development of the CCAC, the Integration System for Central America. So a brief agenda for this presentation. First of all, an overview of this project that is funded by the CCAC, the main achievements until now, because this project is still in implementation. This project will end very soon. After that, my colleague Carlos will tell us about a very interesting integration system that the Central American region has, that has led us to have the achievements that we have now in this project, this kind of coordination between 8 countries in the Central American region. And he's also be presenting the air pollution episode in Central America that recently happened in some weeks ago. So first of all, like a background, so this is a project that is built on a previous one that was also funded by the Climate and Clean Air Coalition. In this first project in 2022, integrated roadmap on air quality, short-lived climate pollutants mitigation and health for this region in Central America was developed. And this project is a specific project that began their implementation last year in 2023 and will end very soon in September 2024. In this project, it is aimed to implement some of the actions of this roadmap. So one of the actions is the development of an air quality and health model legislation for this Central American region, but also a development of an air quality monitoring strategy, and of course, strengthen existing institutional and technical capacities for CCAC countries, now for members of this integration system. So as key partners in this project, of course, is the integration system for Central America, the environmental and health branch. What is very interesting for this project is coordination between the health and environment branch in the CCAC. The Pan American Health Organization also was a key stakeholder and key partner in this project, and also the United Nations Environment Program, the LAC, the Office for Latin American and the Caribbean region. The implementer for this project is the Clean Air Institute. So as the countries that have been involved in this project, so we have here in this map that you can see, we have Belize, we have Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Panama, and Dominican Republic. So as main achievements, I would like to highlight, first of all, the strong participation of the 8 members of this integration system, the 8 countries that I already mentioned. Because thanks of the coordination of the CCAC, and here my colleague Carlos will also tell us about this. At the start of this project, the countries were asked to designate focal points to participate in this project from the Ministries of Environment and the Ministries of Health. And that brings great coordination and dialogues between the health and environment sectors in each country. Second, the consultation runs with countries because all the documents that have been developed, as I mentioned, the air quality legislation and the air quality strategy, monitoring strategy, have been consulted with all these countries with the focal points designated for this country. Of course, there's a challenge because countries are at different levels of the air quality management. You have some countries that have air quality monitoring networks. We have others that do not have air quality monitoring. Some countries have a legal framework, other countries do not have. But of course, at the same time, we were able to identify common needs, challenges, and opportunities identified in this project. Also, as main achievement, I would like to highlight the coordination of international agencies to support this project. As I mentioned, Pan American Health Organization, UNEP, and that has led us to, for example, organize a regional workshop that was held in Medellin, in Colombia, this year in April, where we gathered together to discuss about the air quality legislation and different sections of this legislation, as air quality standards, how to manage air pollution episodes, the administrative framework for enforcement of this law, strategies for prevention, reduction, and control of air pollution, etc. And we had the opportunity to discuss together with the support of the international organizations. And for example, also this model legislation considers a guideline that was developed by UNEP on air quality legislation, like a checklist of everything you have to have in mind when you develop a legislation of this nature. And of course, the capacity building activities. Very soon there will start a training that will be held, that will be hosted by the virtual campus of the Pan American Health Organization. This will start in July 2024 until August. And all these 8 countries have been invited to designate representatives to be trained in this guided course, that the air quality management course that will be led by PAHO in this virtual campus. So that's for main achievements. I would like to pass the floor to my colleague Carlos Gonzalez, that will tell us about the Central American integration system and this interesting coordination among the countries. Carlos, please, the floor is yours.
Hi, Luisa. Thank you. Greetings, everyone. My name is Carlos Gonzalez. I work as environmental quality advisor of CCAD and in charge of the action of the environmental quality in the regional environmental framework strategy for a period of 2021 and 2025. And this is important to know. They don't know the CCAD is the Secretary of the Central American Integration System in charge of the environmental agenda. And this agenda is written in the RAM and formed by the Council of the Environmental Minister of the 8 country of the CCAC region, the 8 country that Luisa presented in the first slide. And then the RAM has established a strategy to work on environmental quality and air quality in the region. Next slide. And here's the environmental air quality action they implemented in the RAM. And some actions are established for the roadmap to improve the air quality, harmonize the law, and implementation of monitoring system and interinstitutional work, in this case with COMISCA, which is in charge of the health agenda in CCAC. Also, we work some partnership with energy, transport, and agriculture. There is plasma in this air quality agenda. Next slide. Next slide. So in time, next slide. Thank you, Lisa. This is important. Like Lisa mentioned, we had a first project that we work in the roadmap of climate change, air quality, and health. In February of 2023, under the Belize pro tempore presidency, in the meeting of Minister of CCAD, they received the roadmap for the harmonized climate change, air quality, and health program. This roadmap was approved by 8 ministers of the Central America and República Dominican, and they instructed to support all the actions established in the roadmap and continue to strengthen that interinstitutional coordination created with COMISCA, CCAC, UNED, PAHO, and Clear Institute. And we already had the political support and working together with the CCAD to the regional and national level to meet the goal out set up in this roadmap. This is important because we had the political support for that action, and they permitted to advance in another project which Lisa mentioned. Next slide. And this is some picture of the Guatemala, the first picture, Honduras. Honduras, the first picture, and the second picture of Guatemala. This year was difficult for the region of the environment in terms of air quality, reached alarming concentration in Honduras and Guatemala to affect the health of the population and forced for us to take prevention action. Some of this improvement in the region continue to work to improve the air quality. It's difficult because we don't have a monitoring system in this project, which allows you to present a proposal for the monitoring system in the region. Next slide. And this is from El Salvador. They start one day a clean air, and in another morning they have no clean air. We had some problem for that. This is a common for the dry season in the first month of the year. And this, we had to work for improve the air quality. Thank you, Luisa.
Thank you so much, Luisa and Luis, for all of the work that you're doing to improve air quality and preventing some health consequences of air pollution in Central America. So basically, I think we are running out of time for this session. So I think we have about 3 minutes. If anyone in the audience have any question for the presenters, I mean, this is the time to ask a few questions, and then we can, if you have, you can also put in the chat your questions, and we'll make sure to get the answers and send them around as well after the call. Now the floor is open for a brief session of Q&As. Going once, going twice. So it looks like there's no question. I actually have a lot of questions, but I will actually hold on to my question again, given that we are running so we are so behind. So with that, I will actually give the floor here to Ben for his actually concluding remark of today's session. Ben, the floor is yours. Is Ben still with us? Okay, it looks like we don't, it looks like we lost Ben along the way. So with that, I think I will actually, I see a question coming here in the chat. Is there a question here? So what are the best practices for SLCP planning to be shared? What are the barriers? So we do have a number of resources on the CCAC website here in terms of practices. So, but Seraphine, do you want to chime in here?
Thank you very much, Malik, and thank you, Ma, for your question. So yes, indeed, we have a number of planning tools that we can share and also like experience from other countries. And actually one is currently being updated, so it's also a good time to announce it. So we had in 2018, we had developed a guideline that also Chris mentioned, that was about guiding countries in integrating SLCPs into their NDC updates. And this is now being updated. So this guidance, which is also timely now in view of the NDC 3.0 process. So I will keep you informed. Very likely it's going to be launched next month, and that we are also planning a number of regional workshops where we will be also guiding through those planning tools. Thank you.
Thanks, Seraphine. So basically, I mean, let me just go ahead and conclude this call here. But before then, I'd like to actually thanks all of the speakers who actually came in this morning, and then to share their experience in SLCP planning and implementation. I think we have heard tremendous, really good examples here, and the common theme here is that planning is actually very key. If we were to actually be able to identify the actions that are actually needed to help us achieve our targets. And the other thing is that funding is also important here to be able to actually implement the actions that countries identify in the plan. And resources are out there. I'm not saying that all of the we don't have. There's not resources to actually fill all the financing gap. However, there are opportunities out there that countries can actually tap into. CCAC is available to provide a number of technical assistance to help countries actually do the planning and engagement, as Bala mentioned, with international organization as well could be an opportunity, as well as even work with the private sector can be an opportunity as well to identify funding to support some of the actions that countries are identified in the plan. So there will be challenges, but I think those challenges should not be, if you will, a deal breaker, preventing countries to making progress toward the SLCP reduction target. And I think I see someone raising his hand here. Who is that? I cannot see the name of that person here, but whoever raised his hand, go ahead, please. I cannot see the name because I'm using the browser of Teams.
Yes, this is Elena Bikova from Moldova. I will just try to allow your mic so you can ask your question directly or put it into the chat.
Good afternoon.
Yes, perfect. Yes, Stella. Hello,
Yes.
Stella.
It's Moldova team on GAG and unfair inventory. We would like to mention that Moldova also is in process of elaboration national planning of short-lived climate pollutants. It will be based on projections of GAG and air pollutants. We are working with Stockholm Environment Institute on projection to estimate adequate measures, and we would like to congratulate Nigeria for their 22 estimated measures. My questions, and I'm wondering regarding the implementation and financing of these measures, financing, how to get finance to implement these measures and to achieve inputs, and if possible, how to facilitate, to include or to make connections with CCDR report, the climate change development report in process of development by the World Bank, and to have one more financial partner on our side to include them in our national planning of short-lived climate pollutants. Thank you.
Thanks so much for your question here. In terms of funding for actions to support reduction actions, CCAC does have a number of funding windows. It's very limited funding to which countries can actually submit proposal, and there is basically a transformation window as well. I think that I'm not sure. Serafin, can you provide more information on the deadline for submission? Most likely has already been closed, but I think that window opens every year. That can be definitely an opportunity to actually secure funding to support action identified in plans. And then I think engagement as well with international organizations such as the World Bank and other bilateral aid agencies as well can also be a source of funding. I think each of those organizations usually have teams in your country where you can actually engage directly with whenever there is an alignment between the action that you are proposing and the development strategy. Often there can be opportunity for funding as well. Serafin, would you like to actually chime in here, please?
Yes, thank you, Malik. I think you already covered it well. So yes, indeed, Stella, so we have the different processes. So one is the expression of interest, where countries can come forward with their needs and priorities. And so this is, we're expecting the next round to be early next year. So there's no date yet, but this is really the opportunity. And we have also now, in terms of funding, like the major bulk of it really is for implementing some of those priority measures. So yes, really encouraging countries to submit or to use this process. And the other one, yes, indeed, it's a transformative process where it's really about moving the needle in a specific sector. And here also we just closed one call for proposal, and likely we'll have another one next year. So they're also a good opportunity. But indeed, the resources, our resources, the CCAC is one thing, but it's really key then to, on the one hand, also in the NDC 3.0 process to also, it's also Chris mentioned, like to already reflect on how those measures could be financed also and to cost those measures and to identify potential funding mechanism and also to engage with other funding partners. And many of them are within the CCAC, so there's really good opportunity also to link up with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Seraphine. It looks like Ben is back, but you're frozen. Are you still able to join the call, Ben?
Yes. Malik, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think it's time for me now to give the closing remark. Sorry, I keep on being kicked out of the meeting because of the internet connection, but I think I'll be able to give this short remark. I just like to thank all the participants on this group. I think this was a very fruitful discussion and this is all this group is about, share experience. We had some interesting discussion and point and reflection about the next step. And whether you are a developed country or a developing country or a new in this process, I think one key point here is to remember that in all this process of SSCP mitigation, the planning, a good planning is always key. It will help you understand where your emissions are, and it will also help us design a good implementation pathway, and most importantly, raise the necessary coalition of support to go through a deep implementation. We heard from very interesting speakers today, and I hope you will all continue to stay engaged with this group and also have the necessary information that will guide you through the implementation. So now we'll maybe hand over to Malik and the Secretariat maybe for the next step after this session. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Ben, for your concluding remark. And I also want to actually mention something really quickly here. As I indicated earlier at the beginning of the call, I was one of the co-chair. I'm one of the co-chair for this hub, along with Ben. But I will actually leave my current position next month. So this will be my last meeting with the National Planning and Implementation Hub. It was pretty much a very good honor for me to co-chair this hub during the past 18 months. And I learned a lot from many of you. And I've also have been able to actually develop a wonderful partnership with some of you as well. And but I will still remain in the climate change world. I will be moving to Nigeria, where I will be leading the USAID economic growth portfolio there. So it's been a tremendous pleasure for me to be with you all during the past 18 months. I'd like to thank CCAC for giving me that opportunity. With that, Seraphine, if you have anything else to add, and we can actually close on today's meeting. Thank you everyone for joining today's call.
Thank you, Malik, and thank you, Malik, for all your very active and dynamic engagement over the last 18 months. So it was really a pleasure, and I think well, it's we are reconnecting in a different way. So it's good also to know that you will be in Nigeria where we have so much also engagement going on. So thank you, and thank you to all the speakers today, and thank you, Ben. And I mean, there's so much more to talk about. So it's always too short the time, but it shows that how much is actually going on. And we will be sharing the presentations, the recording with all of you. And please don't hesitate if you have any other questions to come back to us, and then we're happy to respond. So thank you to all, and hope to see you and hear you soon.
Thanks, everyone, and have a good rest of your day today. Thanks, Serafin. Thanks, Ben.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mali. See you soon.
Have a nice day. Have a nice evening.